Hi, I'm Pauline. They called me the family disappointment, said I was chasing fantasies while my brother Marcus was building a real career. They chose him over me, kicked me out to protect his precious reputation. 10 years later, I walked into the boardroom of Richardson Associates as the new CEO and said, "Marcus, you're fired. Security will escort you out." Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I was always the one asking why not, while everyone else was saying, that's not how we do things. Not in a rebellious way, but in a curious way. Where others saw established processes, I saw opportunities for innovation. Where they valued tradition, I dreamed of transformation. My name is Pauline Carter, and I grew up in Marietta, Georgia, in a family that worshipped at the altar of respectability and conventional success. My father Robert ran Richardson Associates, a prestigious advertising agency that had been serving Atlanta's elite businesses for over 30 years. It was the kind of place where 3 martini lunches still happened, where handshake deals carried more weight than contracts, and where, "we've always done it this way," was considered the highest form of wisdom. My brother Marcus was 7 years older than me, and from the moment he could walk, he was groomed to inherit Dad's empire. By the time I was in high school, he was already working as an account executive, schmoozing clients at the country club, and collecting commendations for his natural business instincts. Marcus married Jessica when I was 17. She came from what my mother Linda called good stock, old Atlanta money, the kind that came with debutante balls and charity galas, and very strong opinions about proper behavior. From the day she joined our family, Jessica looked at me like I was a puzzle piece that didn't belong in their perfectly ordered picture. She'd watch me at family dinners, her diamond tennis bracelet catching the light as she sipped her wine, and I could practically see the calculations running behind her eyes. Here was this girl who talked about websites and social media and digital marketing like they were real things, like they mattered as much as golf course connections and alumni networks. "Still playing with your computer games, Pauline?" She'd ask at every family gathering, her voice dripping with the kind of condescension that Southern women have perfected into an art form. "When are you going to get serious about your future?" Everyone would laugh politely, the sound echoing off the walls of our colonial home in Marietta, while I forced a smile and continued eating my mother's famous peach cobbler. But I wasn't playing games, I was studying. While Marcus was learning to perfect his firm handshake and memorize client preferences for their bourbon, I was devouring everything I could find about this new thing called the internet. This was the late 90s, when most people still thought the web was a fad that would pass like pet rocks or mood rings. I saw something different. I saw the future reshaping itself in real time, and I wanted to be part of building it. I remember spending hours in my bedroom, the glow of our family's ancient desktop computer illuminating my face as I taught myself HTML, studied emerging social platforms, analyzed how businesses were starting to present themselves online. My parents thought I was wasting time. "Pauline's going through a phase," my mother would tell her bridge club friends. "She'll grow out of all this technology nonsense and settle down with something practical." The thing about being the youngest in a family of traditionalists is that everything you do gets filtered through the lens of their expectations. When I graduated from Georgia State with a degree in communications and digital media, it wasn't seen as an achievement but as a disappointment. "Communications?" my father had said when I told him my major. "What kind of career is that? Marcus has a business degree from Emory. That's a degree with substance, with connections, with a future." Marcus, meanwhile, was rising through the ranks at Richardson and Associates, like he was following a predetermined script. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. He had the corner office with the view of Peachtree Street, the company BMW, the invitation to every industry event that mattered in Atlanta. He collected clients like trophies, maintaining relationships that had been established decades before he was born. The agency's biggest accounts, Coca-Cola's regional campaigns, several major banks, a chain of luxury car dealerships, all trusted him because he spoke their language, understood their world, represented the kind of stability they valued. But I could see the cracks forming even if no one else wanted to acknowledge them. The advertising world was changing rapidly. Clients were starting to ask questions about this thing called digital presence. Younger consumers weren't responding to traditional print and radio campaigns the way their parents had. There were whispers in the industry about companies that were spending more on website development than on billboard space, about this mysterious concept called search engine optimization, about the growing importance of something called social media marketing. Every time I tried to bring these trends to my family's attention, I was dismissed with the kind of gentle patience you'd show a child who insisted they could fly. "Sweetheart," my father would say, "advertising is about relationships, about trust, about understanding human psychology. All this computer stuff is just tools. The fundamentals never change." Jessica was even more direct in her skepticism. "Nobody's going to make real money playing around on the internet, Pauline. Serious business happens in boardrooms, not chat rooms." She had a way of saying internet, like it was something vaguely distasteful, like discussing bathroom habits at a dinner party. After graduation, I tried to get a job at Richardson Associates, not because I particularly wanted to work there, but because I thought maybe I could introduce some digital innovations, help the agency evolve with the changing market. I had ideas about building websites for clients, creating email marketing campaigns, developing what would later be called, quote, content marketing strategies. I prepared a presentation that I was genuinely excited about, full of research and projections and examples of companies that were already succeeding with these new approaches. The meeting lasted exactly 12 minutes. My father sat behind his massive oak desk, the same one his father had used when he started the agency in the 60s. Marcus was there too, leaning against the wall in his perfectly tailored suit, arms crossed, wearing the expression of someone watching a child perform a piano recital, politely interested but fundamentally unimpressed. "Pauline," my father said when I finished my presentation, "this is all very creative, but Richardson Associates has built its reputation on proven strategies, established relationships, time-tested approaches. We're not going to risk our clients' success on untested theories about computer advertising." Marcus nodded sagely. "Dad's right. Our clients trust us because we understand their market, their customers, their needs. They don't want to be guinea pigs for experimental technology. They want results from methods that work." "But the methods are changing," I insisted. "Consumer behavior is shifting. Younger demographics are spending more time online than watching television or reading newspapers. If we don't adapt, we're going to lose relevance." The silence that followed was suffocating. My father's expression shifted from paternal tolerance to something colder, more final. "Pauline, I think you might be better suited for a different kind of company. Maybe something more contemporary. There are probably businesses out there that share your enthusiasm for this computer marketing. Richardson and Associates is not one of them." I left that meeting feeling like I'd been diagnosed with a terminal illness of irrelevance. But instead of discouraging me, the rejection crystallized something important. I realized I wasn't trying to join their world anymore. I was trying to build my own. I spent the next few months working at a small startup downtown, a company that designed websites for local businesses. The pay was terrible. The office was a converted warehouse in a sketchy part of town, and my family acted like I'd joined a cult. "She's wasting her education," I heard my mother tell my aunt during one of their weekly phone calls, "working for some little computer company that probably won't exist next year." But I was learning everything I could about digital marketing, about user experience design, about the psychology of online consumer behavior. I worked with small business owners who were desperate to understand how to reach customers in this new digital landscape. I helped a local restaurant create their first website and watched their takeout orders double within 6 months. I developed an email newsletter for a boutique clothing store that increased their repeat customer rate by 40%. These weren't huge victories, but they were proof of concept. They were evidence that the future I'd been dreaming about was actually possible. The tension at family gatherings became increasingly uncomfortable. Marcus would regale everyone with stories of his latest big client wins, the expensive dinners he was hosting, the exclusive events he was attending. Meanwhile, I'd sit quietly, knowing that any mention of my work would be met with polite disinterest at best, outright dismissal at worst. "How's your little internet job going?" Jessica would ask with a smile so sweet it could cause diabetes. still helping people build their, what do you call them, websites? It's going well, I'd respond, not bothering to elaborate about the strategies I was developing, the results I was seeing, the vision I was building for how commerce and communication were about to be revolutionized. My parents' disappointment in my career choices became a constant background hum in every interaction. They'd compare me to Marcus constantly, never directly but through 1,000 small comments and implications. "Marcus landed another major account this week," my mother would say during our weekly phone calls. "The agency is doing so well. Your father is so proud." The unspoken comparison hung in the air like humidity. The breaking point came on my 25th birthday. My family had planned what they called a celebration dinner at Bones, one of Atlanta's most prestigious steakhouses in Buckhead. The kind of place where power brokers made deals over dry-aged beef and 20-year-old scotch. I should have known it wasn't really about celebrating me when they chose a restaurant that was more about making an impression than creating a comfortable atmosphere. I dressed carefully that night, wearing a black dress I'd bought specifically for the occasion, hoping to look professional and successful despite my family's perception of my career choices. I arrived at the restaurant to find the table already set, my parents at the head, Marcus and Jessica positioned across from where I would sit. The setup felt formal, almost confrontational, like a board meeting disguised as a family dinner. The conversation started innocuously enough. My father ordered wine, my mother asked about my apartment. Marcus talked about a recent business trip to Charlotte. But I could sense something building beneath the surface, a tension that suggested this dinner had an agenda beyond birthday wishes. "So Pauline," my father said after our appetizers arrived, cutting into his shrimp cocktail with surgical precision, "we need to have a serious conversation about your future." I set down my fork, my stomach suddenly tight with anticipation. "What kind of conversation?" Jessica leaned forward slightly, her perfectly manicured nails drumming against her wineglass. "We're concerned about the path you're taking. This digital marketing thing. It's been 3 years now, and where has it gotten you?" "I'm building valuable skills," I said carefully. "I'm learning about emerging markets, developing expertise in areas that are going to be crucial for businesses going forward." Marcus shook his head with the kind of patronizing smile that made me want to throw my dinner roll at his perfectly coiffed head. "Pauline, you're 25 years old. You should be establishing yourself in a real career, not experimenting with computer games." "It's not computer games," I said, my voice rising slightly despite my efforts to stay calm. "It's digital marketing. It's e-commerce. It's the future of how businesses are going to reach customers." "The future," my father repeated, like I'd just claimed I could predict the weather by reading tea leaves. "Pauline, I've been in advertising for 30 years. I understand marketing. What you're talking about is a novelty, a trend that will pass. Real marketing is about human connection, about understanding psychology, about building trust through proven methods." "But consumer behavior is changing," I insisted. "People are spending more time online. They're researching products on the internet before they buy them. They're reading reviews, comparing prices, making decisions based on information they find on websites. If businesses don't have a digital presence, they're going to lose customers to competitors who do." The silence that followed was deafening. My mother stirred her soup without looking up. Jessica examined her fingernails with exaggerated interest. Marcus and my father exchanged a look that suggested they'd been planning this conversation for weeks. "Pauline," my mother finally said, her voice soft but firm, "we love you, but we're worried that you're throwing away your potential on something that isn't substantial." "What do you mean, substantial?" I asked, though I was beginning to understand where this was heading. My father leaned back in his chair, assuming the posture he used when delivering verdicts to junior employees. "We mean a career with stability, with respect, with a future that doesn't depend on technological fads. Marcus has built something real at Richardson Associates. He's established, respected, financially secure. And what am I?" The question came out sharper than I intended. Jessica answered before anyone else could speak. "You're a 25-year-old woman playing with computers, living in a tiny apartment. working for a company that most people have never heard of, chasing dreams that have no foundation in reality. The words hit me like a physical blow. I looked around the table at these people who were supposed to love me, support me, believe in my potential, and saw only disappointment and condescension. "I believe in what I'm doing," I said quietly. "Belief doesn't pay bills," Marcus said. "Belief doesn't build a respectable life. Belief doesn't create the kind of security and status that matter in the real world." My father reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. My heart sank as I recognized the gesture from countless business meetings I'd witnessed throughout my childhood. The envelope represented a decision that had already been made, a conclusion that didn't require my input. "We've talked about this as a family," he said, placing the envelope on the table between us. "We think it's time for you to make a choice. Either you get serious about building a real career, and there's always a position waiting for you at Richardson Associates if you're willing to put aside these digital fantasies, or you find your own way in the world." I stared at the envelope, understanding that it represented an ultimatum disguised as generosity. "What's in there?" $5,000, my mother said. "Enough to get you started somewhere that appreciates your unconventional ideas. Maybe California, where people are more open to experimental business concepts." The implication was clear. They were offering to pay me to leave, to take my embarrassing career choices and relocate them far enough away that they wouldn't reflect poorly on the family reputation. "You're asking me to leave Atlanta?" "We're asking you to choose," Jessica said, her voice carrying the kind of false kindness that Southern women use when delivering particularly cruel truths. "Choose between pursuing these unrealistic dreams and being part of a family that has actual standards, actual success, actual respect in this community." I looked at Marcus, hoping to find some trace of the brother who had taught me to ride a bike, who had helped me with homework, who had once defended me when neighborhood kids made fun of my thick glasses. Instead, I saw a stranger in an expensive suit, someone who had clearly been part of planning this intervention. "What do you think I should do, Marcus?" I asked. He had the decency to look uncomfortable for about 3 seconds before his natural arrogance reasserted itself. "I think you should accept reality, Pauline. The internet isn't going to replace real business. Digital marketing isn't going to replace actual relationships and proven strategies. You're smart enough to succeed in legitimate fields if you just stop chasing fantasies." The betrayal was complete. This wasn't about my career choices or my financial stability. This was about embarrassment. About their perception that my unconventional path reflected poorly on their conventional success. They didn't want me to fail, but they couldn't tolerate me succeeding in ways they didn't understand or respect. I picked up the envelope, feeling its weight in my hands. $5,000. Enough to relocate, to start over, to pursue my fantasies, far away from their judgment and disapproval. "If I take this," I said slowly, "what happens to us? What happens to our relationship?" My father's expression softened slightly, but his resolve remained firm. "If you take it and use it wisely to build something real, something respectable, then you'll always have a place in this family. But if you take it and continue down this path of digital marketing nonsense, then you'll be choosing to separate yourself from everything we've built, everything we represent." I stood up, the envelope still in my hands, and looked around the table one more time. These people had raised me, educated me, shaped my understanding of the world for the first 25 years of my life. They had also just made it clear that their love came with conditions, that their support required conformity to their vision of success. "I need some air," I said, walking away from the table without another word. Outside the restaurant, the Atlanta evening was warm and humid, the kind of night that made everything feel thick and heavy with possibility. I stood on the sidewalk, watching well-dressed people enter and exit the restaurant, all of them playing their parts in the same script my family wanted me to memorize. I opened the envelope and counted the money, $5,000 in crisp hundreds, enough to move across the country, to start fresh, to pursue my vision without the constant weight of their disappointment. Or enough to fund the next phase of my education, to invest in equipment and software, to turn my digital marketing dreams into something that could prove them all wrong. I made my decision standing there on the sidewalk outside Bones, listening to the distant hum of traffic on Peachtree Street. I wasn't going to California to hide my ambitions. I wasn't going to abandon my beliefs to earn their approval. I was going to take their money and use it to build something that would force them to reconsider everything they thought they knew about the future of business. I walked back into the restaurant, returned to our table where they were sitting in uncomfortable silence, and placed the empty envelope in the center of the table. "Thank you for the loan," I said calmly. "I'll pay it back with interest when my digital marketing fantasies start generating more revenue than your traditional advertising methods." My father's face went through several color changes. "Pauline, this isn't a loan. This is us helping you transition to a more realistic career path." "I understand what you intended," I replied, "but I'm choosing to see it differently. Consider it seed money for my future success. When I prove that digital marketing isn't a fad, when I build something that revolutionizes how businesses reach customers, when I create a company that makes Richardson Associates look like a relic from a bygone era, I'll pay you back every penny, with interest." Jessica's laugh was sharp and bitter. "You're delusional, Pauline. You're going to waste that money on computer equipment and website hosting and all the other nonsense you think matters. And in 5 years you'll be broke and alone and wishing you'd listen to people who actually understand how the world works." I smiled at her, feeling a strange sense of liberation wash over me. Maybe, but at least I'll be broke and alone pursuing something I believe in, rather than comfortable and miserable pretending to be someone I'm not. I kissed my mother on the cheek, shook my father's hand, nodded politely to Marcus and Jessica, and walked out of that restaurant knowing I was walking out of their version of my life forever. The next 3 years were the hardest of my life, but also the most educational. I used their $5,000 to purchase better equipment, to take online courses in web development and digital marketing strategy, to attend conferences where I was usually the youngest person in the room by at least a decade. I worked multiple part-time jobs to pay for rent and food while building my expertise and my client base. I moved out of my apartment in Marietta and found a tiny studio in Midtown Atlanta, close enough to the emerging tech scene to network with other entrepreneurs, but far enough from my family's social circles to avoid uncomfortable encounters. My parents would call occasionally, usually when they'd heard through mutual friends that I was still playing with computers, offering gentle suggestions that it wasn't too late to reconsider my choices. Marcus, meanwhile, was thriving in the traditional advertising world. Richardson Associates was growing, adding new clients, expanding their office space. He bought a house in Buckhead, joined the country club, started playing golf with potential clients twice a week. Everything was proceeding according to the script our family had written for success. But I was learning things they couldn't see from their corner offices and client dinners. I was watching the internet evolve from a novelty into a necessity. I was seeing small businesses double their revenue by implementing digital marketing strategies. I was understanding how data analytics could reveal customer insights that traditional market research had missed entirely. More importantly, I was building something of my own. The weeks following that dinner at Bones felt like living in a strange parallel universe where everything looked the same, but operated by completely different rules. My family didn't officially disown me, but the silence was deafening. No more weekly calls from my mother asking about my weekend plans. No more invitations to Sunday dinner or family gatherings. No more casual drop-ins when they were in my neighborhood. It was as if I had become invisible, a ghost haunting the periphery of their perfectly ordered lives. I threw myself into work with an intensity that bordered on obsession. My tiny studio apartment in Midtown became command central for what I was beginning to think of as my digital marketing laboratory. I had transformed the main room into an office space, with multiple monitors displaying analytics dashboards, social media feeds, and client websites. The Murphy bed stayed folded up most days because I was working 18-hour stretches, surviving on coffee and determination. My client base was growing, slowly but steadily. Word was spreading through Atlanta's small business community about this young woman who could help companies navigate the mysterious world of online marketing. I was working with a vintage clothing boutique in Little Five Points, helping them build an e-commerce platform that tripled their sales within 6 months. I developed a digital strategy for a local bakery that resulted in lines around the block for their specialty cupcakes after a social media campaign went viral. These weren't Fortune 500 companies, but they were real businesses seeing real results from the strategies I was developing. But the professional success couldn't completely mask the personal isolation. Atlanta is a city where family connections matter, where your surname carries weight in business circles, where knowing the right people opens doors that remain permanently closed to outsiders. By choosing to pursue my own path, I had voluntarily exiled myself from those networks. I was building something entirely from scratch, without the safety net of family influence or established relationships. The isolation became particularly acute during the holidays. Thanksgiving came and went without a single phone call from my parents. I spent Christmas Day alone in my apartment, working on a campaign for a client while most of the city celebrated with their families. I told myself I was too busy to care, too focused on building my future to waste time mourning the past, but late at night when the city grew quiet, I felt the weight of my choices pressing down like a physical presence. January brought an unexpected opportunity that would change everything. I received a call from Sarah Mitchell, the marketing director at Pinnacle Financial, one of Atlanta's largest banking institutions. They were looking for someone to help them understand this thing called online banking that their competitors were starting to offer. The conversation itself was surreal. Here was a major corporation admitting they needed help with digital technology from someone they probably saw as barely out of college. "We're not looking for anything revolutionary," Sarah explained during our initial meeting in their downtown headquarters. "We just need someone to help us figure out if this internet banking thing is something our customers actually want, and if so, how we might implement it without alienating our existing client base." I wanted to laugh at the understatement. Online banking wasn't just something customers wanted. It was going to become essential for any financial institution that hoped to survive the next decade. But I kept my observations diplomatic, focusing instead on conducting market research that would help them understand the scope of the opportunity they were facing. The project took 3 months and involved everything from customer surveys to competitive analysis to focus groups with different demographic segments. What I discovered was a massive disconnect between what Pinnacle's leadership assumed about their customers and what those customers actually wanted. The executives thought online banking was a novelty that might appeal to a small subset of tech-savvy young professionals. The reality was that customers across all age groups were frustrated with the limitations of traditional banking and eager for more convenient, accessible financial services. My final presentation to Pinnacle's executive team was scheduled for a Thursday morning in April. I had prepared extensively, creating detailed charts and projections that demonstrated not just the opportunity but the urgency. Banks that failed to embrace digital services weren't just missing growth opportunities. They were positioning themselves to become irrelevant as customer expectations evolved. The presentation went better than I had dared to hope. The executives asked intelligent questions, took detailed notes, and seemed genuinely surprised by the data I had compiled. By the end of the meeting, they were talking about implementation timelines and budget allocations for a comprehensive digital transformation initiative. "This is exactly the kind of strategic thinking we need," Sarah told me as we walked out of the conference room. "Have you ever considered working for a larger organization? We could use someone with your insights on our marketing team." The offer was tempting in ways I hadn't expected. A position at Pinnacle would provide financial security, professional credibility, and the chance to work on projects with real scale and impact. It would also represent a kind of vindication, proof that my digital marketing expertise was valuable enough to attract attention from major corporations. But something held me back from accepting immediately. Maybe it was the memory of my family's ultimatum, their insistence that success required conforming to their definition of respectability. Maybe it was the realization that working for someone else's company, no matter how prestigious, would mean building their vision rather than my own. Or maybe it was simply the growing confidence that I could create something bigger and more meaningful as an independent entrepreneur. "I appreciate the offer," I told Sarah, "but I'm committed to building my own consulting practice. However, I'd be very interested in working with Pinnacle as a client, helping you implement the digital strategies we've discussed." That decision proved to be a turning point. Pinnacle became my largest client, paying me more in 6 months than I had earned in the previous 2 years combined. More importantly, they became a case study that opened doors with other major corporations. Success with a respected financial institution gave me credibility that no amount of small business victories could have provided. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was achieving the kind of professional recognition my family valued, just not in the way they had envisioned. I was working with Fortune 500 companies, generating significant revenue, building a reputation as an expert in an emerging field. But because my success was tied to digital marketing rather than traditional advertising, it might as well have been happening in another universe as far as they were concerned. I learned about Marcus's engagement to Jessica through a mutual friend, not from any family announcement. They were planning a lavish wedding at the Cherokee Country Club, the kind of event that would cement their position in Atlanta's social hierarchy. I wasn't invited, of course, but the news still stung, not because I wanted to attend, but because it highlighted how completely I had been erased from their narrative of family success. The wedding took place on a Saturday in June. I spent that day working on a proposal for a new client, a national restaurant chain, that wanted to understand how digital marketing could help them compete with emerging food delivery services. But I found myself distracted, imagining the ceremony I wasn't attending, the celebration of a relationship built on shared values that I apparently didn't possess. That evening, I received a text message from an unknown number. The message was brief and unsigned. Saw your work with Pinnacle Financial mentioned in the business journal. Impressive results. Perhaps we underestimated your potential. I stared at the message for several minutes, trying to decode its meaning. The formal tone suggested it was from someone in my family, probably my father, but the lack of signature made it impossible to be certain. It felt like a tentative olive branch, an acknowledgement that my career choices were producing results they couldn't entirely ignore. I drafted several responses, ranging from gracious acceptance to bitter rejection, but ultimately decided not to reply at all. If they wanted to rebuild our relationship, it would require more than anonymous text messages and grudging admissions that I might have been right about digital marketing's potential. Summer brought another major opportunity. TechFlow Dynamics, a software company based in Charlotte, reached out about a comprehensive digital marketing overhaul. They were launching a new product, business management software, designed specifically for small and medium-sized enterprises, and needed someone who understood both technology and marketing to help them reach their target audience. The project was unlike anything I had tackled before. Instead of helping traditional businesses adapt to digital tools, I was working with a technology company that needed to communicate complex software benefits to non-technical business owners. It required developing marketing strategies that could bridge the gap between innovation and practical application. I spent 2 weeks in Charlotte, working directly with TechFlow's product development team to understand their software's capabilities and limitations. The experience was revelatory. I wasn't just creating marketing campaigns. I was helping to shape how the product itself would be positioned and presented to potential customers. My input was influencing everything from user interface design to pricing strategies to customer support protocols. The TechFlow project introduced me to a completely different ecosystem of business relationships. Instead of working with companies that were reluctantly adapting to digital transformation, I was collaborating with organizations that were driving that transformation. The conversations were about innovation and disruption and market creation, rather than tradition and stability and risk avoidance. More importantly, working with TechFlow gave me insights into how technology companies operated, how they thought about growth and scalability and competitive advantage. I began to understand that the most successful businesses in this emerging digital economy weren't just using new tools. They were thinking about business itself in fundamentally different ways. By autumn, my consulting practice had grown to the point where I needed help. I hired my first employee, a recent graduate from Georgia Tech named David Kim, who had studied computer science but was fascinated by the intersection of technology and business strategy. David brought technical skills that complemented my marketing expertise, and together we started taking on larger, more complex projects. The success was gratifying, but it also intensified my sense of isolation from my family. Every professional milestone felt bittersweet because I had no one to share it with who understood its significance. My parents had taught me to value achievement and recognition, but now that I was achieving both, they weren't part of my life to witness or celebrate it. The isolation became particularly acute when I learned that Richardson Associates was struggling. Through industry connections, I heard whispers that the agency was losing clients to competitors who offered more comprehensive digital services. Marcus was apparently working longer hours, trying to maintain relationships with traditional clients while the advertising landscape shifted beneath his feet. Part of me wanted to reach out, to offer assistance, or at least acknowledge that the challenges they were facing weren't personal failures but industry-wide transformations. But the memory of that dinner at Bones, the ultimatum they had delivered, the conditions they had placed on their love and support, kept me from making contact. They had made their choice about what kind of relationship they wanted with me. I had to respect that choice, even if I didn't understand it. Winter brought news that Richardson Associates had lost their largest client, the regional Coca-Cola account that had been with the agency for over 15 years. The client was moving to a larger firm that could provide integrated digital marketing services alongside traditional advertising. It was exactly the kind of market shift I had predicted years earlier, the inevitable result of refusing to adapt to changing customer expectations and technological capabilities. I learned about the account loss through David, who had heard it from a friend who worked at the new agency handling the Coca-Cola business. The news was delivered as industry gossip, but for me it felt like watching a slow-motion car accident involving people I still cared about, despite everything that had happened between us. "Should you reach out?" David asked when he saw my reaction to the news. "Maybe offer to help them develop digital capabilities?" The suggestion was logical from a business perspective. Richardson and Associates clearly needed expertise they didn't possess, and I had built exactly the kind of digital marketing practice that could complement their traditional strengths. But the personal complications made any collaboration impossible. How do you offer professional assistance to people who had rejected your vision so completely that they had been willing to pay you to leave town? Instead of reaching out directly, I did something that felt both generous and self-protective. I started referring smaller clients to other traditional advertising agencies in Atlanta, specifically mentioning that they might benefit from partnering with Richardson and Associates for projects that required both digital innovation and established client relationships. It was a way of helping without having to confront the personal dynamics that made direct communication impossible. The referrals worked exactly as I had hoped. Several small businesses ended up working with Richardson and Associates on projects that combined my digital strategies with their traditional advertising expertise. The collaborations were successful enough that other agencies started reaching out to me about similar partnerships. By the end of my second year as an independent consultant, I had inadvertently created a new business model, serving as a digital marketing specialist who could partner with traditional agencies to provide comprehensive services to clients who needed both old-school relationship management and cutting-edge technological capabilities. It was exactly the kind of industry evolution I had envisioned, just implemented in a way that allowed me to maintain professional distance from my family's business. The success of this partnership model led to my first real expansion opportunity. A marketing executive at Delta Airlines reached out about a project that would require coordinating digital marketing strategies across multiple traditional advertising agencies in different markets. They needed someone who could serve as a central coordinator, ensuring consistency and effectiveness across all their marketing channels. The Delta project was massive, in scope and complexity. I was working with advertising agencies in Atlanta, Charlotte, Nashville, and Jacksonville, helping them integrate digital components into traditional campaigns for one of the South's most prominent corporations. The project required me to travel constantly, managing relationships with dozens of professionals, while maintaining oversight of digital strategies that spanned multiple platforms and demographic targets. More challenging than the logistics was the psychological pressure of working on such a high-profile project. If the Delta campaign succeeded, it would establish me as one of the premier digital marketing consultants in the Southeast. If it failed, the failure would be public and career-defining in ways that no amount of small business success could overcome. The campaign launched in March, timed to coincide with the beginning of spring travel season. Within 2 weeks, we were seeing results that exceeded every projection Delta had provided. Online booking increased by 37% compared to the same period the previous year. Customer engagement with Delta's digital platforms improved across every metric we were tracking. Most importantly, the integration of digital and traditional marketing elements was creating a cohesive brand experience that strengthened customer loyalty while attracting new business. The success of the Delta campaign generated industry attention that I hadn't anticipated. Trade publications wrote articles about the innovative integration of digital and traditional marketing strategies. Conference organizers started inviting me to speak about the future of advertising and marketing integration. Other major corporations began reaching out about similar projects, but the recognition that meant the most came from an unexpected source. I was working late in my expanded office space. I had moved out of my studio apartment and into a proper commercial space in Midtown when my assistant knocked on my door. "There's someone here to see you," she said. "He says he's from Richardson Associates." My heart stopped for a moment before I realized it probably wasn't Marcus or my father. More likely it was a junior employee sent to discuss a potential collaboration or partnership opportunity. I had been expecting this conversation for months, knowing that eventually the industry dynamics would force some kind of professional interaction between my practice and my family's agency. "Send him in," I said, closing my laptop and trying to compose myself for what could be an emotionally complicated conversation. The door opened and Marcus walked in. He looked older than I remembered, with lines around his eyes that hadn't been there 2 years earlier. His suit was still perfectly tailored, his hair still expertly styled, but there was something different about his posture, his expression, the way he carried himself. The supreme confidence that had always defined him seemed diminished somehow, replaced by something that looked uncomfortably like uncertainty. "Hello, Pauline," he said, standing awkwardly in my doorway like he wasn't sure he was welcome. "Marcus." I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "Please, sit down." He took the seat but didn't immediately speak, instead looking around my office with an expression I couldn't quite read. I had decorated the space to reflect both professionalism and innovation. Clean lines and modern furniture combined with multiple monitors displaying real-time analytics from various client campaigns. It was exactly the kind of space I had imagined when I first started dreaming about building my own business. "This is impressive," he finally said. "Really impressive. I had no idea you'd built something this substantial." "Thank you?" I kept my voice neutral, professional. "What brings you by?" He shifted uncomfortably in his chair, clearly struggling with how to begin whatever conversation he'd come to have. "I wanted to talk to you about the industry changes we've both been navigating, about the challenges traditional agencies are facing, about the success you've had helping companies integrate digital strategies." I waited for him to continue, not wanting to make this easier for him than it needed to be. "The truth is," he said finally, "we've been watching your work, following your projects, tracking your success with major clients. You've accomplished exactly what you said you would when we had that conversation at Bones." The acknowledgement hung in the air between us, the closest thing to an apology he seemed capable of offering. "And?" I prompted. "And we need help." The admission clearly cost him something. Richardson Associates is losing clients to agencies that can provide integrated digital services. We're good at what we do, but what we do isn't enough anymore. The market has shifted exactly the way you predicted it would. I leaned back in my chair, studying his face. This was the moment I had imagined during those lonely nights in my studio apartment, the vindication I had dreamed about when I was working 18-hour days to build credibility in an industry that didn't take me seriously. Marcus was sitting in my office, admitting that I had been right about everything they had dismissed as fantasy. But instead of triumph, I felt something more complex. Sadness, maybe. Or disappointment that it had taken them so long to see what seemed obvious to me years earlier. Or frustration that they were only willing to acknowledge my expertise when they needed something from me. "What kind of help are you looking for?" I asked. "Partnership. Collaboration. Some kind of arrangement where Richardson and Associates can offer comprehensive services to clients who need both traditional advertising expertise and digital marketing innovation." "Like the partnerships I've been developing with other agencies around the Southeast?" He nodded. "Exactly like that. We should have been first in line for that kind of collaboration, but..." He trailed off, clearly struggling with how to address the personal complications that had prevented earlier cooperation. "But you thought I was chasing fantasies," I finished for him. "Yes." The admission was quiet but clear. "We were wrong. About the market, about digital marketing, about your vision for how the industry would evolve. We were wrong about all of it." The apology was implicit rather than explicit, but it was there. Marcus was acknowledging not just that my business predictions had been accurate, but that their treatment of me had been unfair and short-sighted. "What does Dad think about you being here?" I asked. Marcus shifted uncomfortably again. "He doesn't know. This is my initiative, my idea. I'm hoping that if we can work out some kind of arrangement, I can present it to him as a business opportunity rather than a family reconciliation. And if he objects to working with me, then Richardson Associates will continue losing clients until we're forced to either adapt or close. His voice was matter of fact, without self-pity. The market doesn't care about family dynamics or personal pride. It cares about results. I considered his proposal, weighing the business opportunity against the personal complications. Working with Richardson Associates would provide access to established client relationships and traditional advertising expertise that could complement my digital strategies. It would also mean regular interaction with family members who had treated me badly enough that I had been willing to accept exile rather than compromise my vision. "I'll need to think about it," I said finally. "Of course." Marcus stood up, pulling a business card from his wallet. "My direct number is on there. And Pauline, I know this is complicated because of our history, but I hope you'll consider the opportunity on its business merits." After he left, I sat in my office for a long time, staring at his business card and thinking about the strange circular nature of success and redemption. 2 years earlier, they had offered me $5,000 to take my digital marketing fantasies somewhere else. Now Marcus was sitting in my office, asking me to save his traditional advertising agency with exactly those fantasies. The next morning brought a phone call that would make the decision for me. "Pauline, this is Jennifer Walsh from TechFlow Dynamics." I recognized the name immediately. Jennifer was the CEO of the software company I had worked with in Charlotte. "I have a proposition that I think will interest you. I'm listening. We're opening a Southeast regional office, and we're looking for someone to head up our marketing and business development efforts in Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina. Someone who understands both technology and traditional business relationships. Someone who can help us bridge the gap between innovation and practical application." The offer she outlined was substantial: Vice President of Regional Marketing, significant salary, equity stake in a rapidly growing technology company, complete autonomy to build marketing strategies for 3 states. It was the kind of position that would establish me as a major player in the Southeast technology ecosystem. "The position would be based in Atlanta," Jennifer continued, "but you'd be building relationships with businesses and organizations throughout the region. You'd essentially be creating a new market for our products while helping traditional businesses understand how technology can solve their operational challenges." It was exactly the kind of opportunity I had been preparing for without realizing it. All the work I had done helping traditional businesses adopt digital strategies, all the relationships I had built with technology companies, all the expertise I had developed in bridging the gap between innovation and implementation, it all led to this moment. "When would you need an answer?" I asked. "We'd like to make this transition as quickly as possible. Ideally, you'd start within the next month." That afternoon, I called Marcus and told him I wouldn't be able to pursue the partnership he had proposed. I explained about the TechFlow opportunity without going into details about the position or the company. I wished him luck with Richardson and Associates and suggested he reach out to some of the other digital marketing consultants I had met through industry connections. "I understand," he said, though I could hear disappointment in his voice. "This is probably better for everyone involved. Less complicated without the family dynamics." "Probably," I agreed. But as I hung up the phone, I realized that my conversation with Marcus had crystallized something important about my own priorities and values. I wasn't interested in vindication or family reconciliation anymore. I was interested in building something meaningful, something that could have real impact on how businesses operated and grew in an increasingly digital world. The TechFlow position offered exactly that opportunity. Instead of helping individual companies adapt to technological change, I would be part of a company that was driving that change. Instead of reacting to market shifts, I would be helping to create them. 2 weeks later, I signed the employment agreement with TechFlow Dynamics and began planning my transition from independent consultant to corporate executive. It felt like the end of one chapter and the beginning of something much larger and more ambitious. I never did pay back that $5,000 my family had given me at Bones. Not because I couldn't afford to, but because I realized they had been right about one thing. It wasn't a loan. It was the price they had paid to remove an embarrassment from their lives. The fact that the embarrassment had turned into expertise they needed wasn't irony. It was justice. My first day at TechFlow Dynamics felt like stepping into a parallel universe, where everything I had believed about business was not only accepted but expected. The Atlanta office occupied 3 floors of a gleaming tower in Buckhead, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city and open-concept workspaces filled with the kind of energy that comes from people who genuinely believe they're changing the world. Jennifer Walsh met me in the lobby at 8 in the morning, dressed in jeans and a blazer that somehow managed to look both casual and authoritative. "Welcome to the future," she said with a grin that suggested she wasn't entirely joking. "Ready to revolutionize how Southern businesses think about technology?" The first month was a whirlwind of orientation sessions, strategy meetings, and market analysis that made my head spin with possibility. TechFlow's business management software wasn't just another technology product. It was a comprehensive platform that could streamline operations, automate routine tasks, and provide real-time analytics that small and medium-sized businesses had never had access to before. My job was to figure out how to explain these capabilities to business owners who still kept their records in filing cabinets and managed their inventory with handwritten lists. The challenge was enormous and exhilarating. I was essentially tasked with creating a market that didn't yet exist, convincing traditional business owners that technology could solve problems they didn't know they had. It required everything I had learned about bridging the gap between innovation and practical application, but on a scale I had never attempted before. I spent my first few weeks traveling throughout Georgia, visiting small manufacturing companies, retail operations, service businesses, and family-owned enterprises that had been operating the same way for decades. The conversations were fascinating and frustrating in equal measure. These were smart, successful business owners who had built profitable companies through hard work and intuition, but they were struggling with challenges that technology could easily address. A furniture manufacturer in Macon was spending 40 hours a week manually tracking inventory and could never quite predict when they'd run out of materials. A chain of auto repair shops in Columbus was losing customers because they couldn't efficiently schedule appointments or track service histories. A catering company in Savannah was turning down lucrative contracts because they couldn't accurately estimate costs or manage complex logistics. Each conversation revealed the same pattern: businesses that were successful despite operational inefficiencies that technology could eliminate. The owners knew they had problems, but they didn't understand that solutions existed, or they assumed that sophisticated business software was only for large corporations with dedicated IT departments. My task was to change that perception, one conversation at a time. The work required a completely different approach than anything I had done as an independent consultant. Instead of working with clients who had already decided they needed digital marketing help, I was approaching business owners who didn't know they needed what I was offering. It meant developing sales skills alongside my marketing expertise, learning to identify pain points that owners might not even recognize as problems. More challenging was the cultural aspect of selling technology in the South. Many of the business owners I met had deep skepticism about anything that seemed too complicated or too different from traditional methods. They valued relationships over efficiency, familiarity over innovation, and they needed to trust the person selling them something before they'd consider trusting the product itself. I learned to lead with questions rather than presentations. Instead of explaining what TechFlow's software could do, I'd ask about their biggest operational challenges, their most time-consuming daily tasks, their concerns about growing their business without losing control of quality or customer service. Once they started talking about their problems, I could demonstrate how our solutions addressed their specific needs, rather than trying to convince them they needed generic technological capabilities. The breakthrough came during my 3rd month, with a family-owned restaurant group that operated 12 locations throughout central Georgia. The owner, Maria Santos, had built her business from a single cafe into a regional success story, but she was drowning in the complexity of managing multiple locations with different menus, varying staff schedules, and inconsistent inventory management. "I spend more time on paperwork than I do thinking about food," she told me during our first meeting in her flagship location in Warner Robins. "I got into this business because I love cooking and serving people. but now I feel like an accountant who happens to own restaurants. Over the course of several meetings, I worked with Maria to map out exactly how TechFlow's platform could streamline her operations. Instead of managing each location separately, she could oversee inventory, scheduling, sales analytics, and customer feedback from a single dashboard. Instead of waiting for weekly reports to understand which locations were performing well, she could access real-time data that would help her make immediate adjustments. The implementation took 6 weeks and transformed Maria's business in ways that surprised even me. Her inventory costs dropped by 23% because the system eliminated both overstocking and stockouts. Staff scheduling became so efficient that she reduced labor costs while improving employee satisfaction. Most importantly, she was able to identify which menu, items, and promotional strategies were most effective at each location, allowing her to optimize operations based on data rather than guesswork. "You gave me my life back," Maria told me 3 months after the system went live. "I can focus on what I'm good at instead of drowning in administrative tasks I hate." More valuable than the immediate business impact was what Maria became: a reference customer who could speak authentically about how technology had improved her operations without compromising the personal relationships and attention to quality that had made her business successful in the first place. Word spread quickly through Georgia's tight-knit business community. Restaurant owners talked to retail owners, who talked to service providers, who talked to manufacturers. Within 6 months, I had a pipeline of potential clients that extended throughout the Southeast, all of them referred by existing customers who could vouch for both the technology's effectiveness and my understanding of their specific challenges and concerns. The success in Georgia led to expansion opportunities in South Carolina and North Carolina. TechFlow promoted me to regional vice president and gave me budget to hire a team of sales and implementation specialists. I was building exactly the kind of operation I had envisioned during those long nights in my studio apartment, a bridge between technological innovation and practical business application. But success also brought unexpected complications. My growing profile in the Southeast business community meant I was increasingly visible at industry events, conferences, and networking functions, where I might encounter people from my previous life. Atlanta's business community is smaller than it appears, and the circles of influence overlap in ways that make complete avoidance impossible. The first awkward encounter happened at a Georgia Chamber of Commerce event in downtown Atlanta. I was there representing TechFlow, networking with potential clients and partners, when I spotted my father across the room talking to a group of executives I didn't recognize. He looked exactly the same, impeccably dressed, perfectly groomed, projecting the kind of confidence that comes from decades of success in traditional business relationships. I considered leaving immediately, but realized that would be both unprofessional and cowardly. I was there in a legitimate business capacity, representing a growing technology company, building relationships that could benefit both TechFlow and the Georgia business community. I had every right to be there, regardless of family complications. My father noticed me about 20 minutes later. I saw recognition flicker across his face, followed by what looked like surprise, and something that might have been pride. He excused himself from his conversation and walked over to where I was standing with Jennifer Walsh and 2 potential clients. "Pauline," he said, with the kind of formal politeness reserved for business acquaintances rather than family members, "I didn't expect to see you here, Dad." I kept my voice equally formal. "I'm here representing TechFlow Dynamics. We're expanding our Southeast operations." Jennifer stepped forward, extending her hand. "You must be Pauline's father. I'm Jennifer Walsh, CEO of TechFlow. Your daughter has been instrumental in building our presence in this market." My father shook her hand, his expression shifting as he processed this information. "TechFlow Dynamics, the business software company?" "That's right," Jennifer replied. "Pauline heads up our regional marketing and business development. She's been incredibly successful helping traditional businesses understand how technology can streamline their operations." I watched my father's face as he absorbed this information. His daughter, the one who had been chasing digital marketing fantasies, was now a vice president at a technology company, attending the same industry events he attended. building relationships with the same business community he had been part of for 30 years. "That's impressive," he said finally. "Congratulations on your success." "Thank you," I replied, not sure how else to respond to such a stilted acknowledgement. The conversation lasted maybe 3 more minutes, filled with the kind of small talk that people use to fill uncomfortable silences. When my father excused himself to return to his original conversation, I felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and disappointment. I had proven myself in exactly the arena he valued most: business success and professional recognition. But the proof had created distance rather than connection. "Family dynamics?" Jennifer asked quietly after he was out of earshot. "Something like that," I replied. The encounter reminded me how much my life had changed in the 4 years since that dinner at Bones. I wasn't the struggling consultant working out of a studio apartment anymore. I was a corporate executive with decision-making authority over a multi-state region, building a team of professionals, managing budgets that exceeded what Richardson Associates generated in annual revenue. But success also brought new pressures and responsibilities. TechFlow was a publicly traded company with quarterly earnings expectations and investor relations obligations. My performance wasn't just measured by client satisfaction or revenue growth anymore. It was evaluated against stock price movements and market share projections that were influenced by factors completely outside my control. The pressure intensified when TechFlow's board decided to accelerate expansion throughout the Southeast. Instead of gradual growth in 3 states, they wanted a presence in 8 states within 18 months. My team went from 5 people to 23 people almost overnight, and I found myself managing operations that spanned from Virginia to Florida. The expansion required partnerships with local businesses and organizations that could provide market knowledge and established relationships. In many cases, that meant working with traditional advertising and marketing agencies that could help us reach business owners who weren't naturally inclined toward technology adoption. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was now in a position to offer exactly the kind of partnership opportunities that Marcus had requested 2 years earlier. TechFlow needed local agencies that could help us understand regional markets and build trust with traditional business owners. Richardson Associates, despite their recent struggles, still had relationships and credibility that could be valuable for our expansion efforts. I could have excluded them from consideration for purely personal reasons, but that would have been unprofessional and potentially detrimental to TechFlow's interests. Instead, I included Richardson Associates in the request for proposals I sent to agencies throughout the region, judging their submission on the same criteria I used for every other potential partner. Their proposal arrived on a Thursday morning in November, delivered by courier rather than email. The presentation was professionally prepared, outlining their experience with traditional business relationships, their understanding of the local market, and their willingness to develop expertise in technology marketing to support TechFlow's objectives. What struck me most wasn't the content of the proposal but the tone. There was no presumption of special treatment, no reference to family connections, no assumption that our personal relationship would influence my business decision. It was written like they were competing for the partnership on merit alone, which was exactly how it should have been. I reviewed their proposal alongside submissions from 12 other agencies, evaluating each based on relevant experience, proposed strategy, budget requirements, and demonstrated understanding of our target market. Richardson Associates ranked in the top 3, but they weren't the clear winner. The decision required several weeks of additional research, including interviews with key personnel from each agency and reference checks with their existing clients. During the interview process, I met with Marcus and 2 other Richardson Associates executives in their downtown office, the same conference room where I had pitched digital marketing strategies to my father years earlier. The conversation was strictly professional. Marcus presented their team's qualifications, outlined their proposed approach for helping TechFlow reach traditional business owners, and answered detailed questions about timelines, deliverables, and performance metrics. He never mentioned our family relationship or made any reference to personal history. At the end of the interview, as his colleagues were gathering their materials, Marcus paused by the conference room door. "I want you to know," he said quietly, "that we understand this decision needs to be based on business considerations alone. We're not expecting any special treatment because of our relationship. I appreciate that, I replied. And I hope you understand that any partnership would be evaluated based on performance and results, not on personal factors. Understood, he said. 2 weeks later, I awarded contracts to 3 agencies, including Richardson and Associates. They had earned the partnership through the quality of their proposal and their demonstrated understanding of the local market, not because of family connections. The collaboration began in January and proved immediately successful. Richardson and Associates brought exactly the kind of traditional business relationships and credibility that TechFlow needed to reach conservative business owners who were skeptical of technology vendors. Meanwhile, my team provided the technical expertise and implementation support that helped those same business owners understand and adopt our platform. Working with Marcus in a professional capacity was strange but not uncomfortable. We communicated primarily through email and formal reports, maintaining the kind of polite distance that characterized business relationships between companies, rather than collaborations between family members. When we did interact directly, usually during monthly review meetings, the conversations focused entirely on project status, client feedback, and performance metrics. The professional boundary we maintained was probably healthier than any attempt at personal reconciliation would have been. It allowed us to leverage each other's strengths without having to address the emotional complications that had driven us apart years earlier. The partnership's success contributed to TechFlow's exceptional performance throughout the Southeast. We exceeded every growth target the board had established, adding clients faster than our implementation team could handle, and generating revenue that attracted attention from technology investors and business media throughout the region. My own profile within TechFlow grew accordingly. I was invited to present at the company's annual investor meeting, profiled in trade publications as an example of successful technology marketing, and recruited for speaking engagements at conferences throughout the country. The recognition was professionally gratifying, but it also created new visibility that made my family dynamics even more awkward. The awkwardness reached a peak when Atlanta Business Chronicle published a cover story about TechFlow's Southeast expansion, featuring a large photograph of me and a detailed account of how I had built the regional operation from scratch. The article mentioned my previous work as an independent digital marketing consultant, but didn't reference any family connections to the advertising industry. I knew my parents would see the article. It was exactly the kind of publication they read religiously. But I wasn't prepared for my mother's phone call the next morning. "Pauline," she said without preamble, "I saw the article in the Chronicle. Your father and I are very proud of what you've accomplished." The statement hung in the air between us, loaded with years of unresolved tension and unexpressed emotion. "Thank you," I said carefully. "We've been following your success with TechFlow," she continued. "It's remarkable what you've built." We had no idea the company had grown so significantly. The conversation lasted maybe 10 minutes, filled with careful politeness and cautious acknowledgments of professional achievement. My mother never directly apologized for the way they had treated me years earlier, and I never explicitly forgave them for choosing Marcus's conventional success over my unconventional vision. But something had shifted. They were finally seeing me as someone who had achieved the kind of business success they valued, even if they didn't fully understand the industry or the methods I had used to achieve it. The phone call was followed by a formal invitation to attend Marcus and Jessica's 5th wedding anniversary party at their home in Buckhead. The invitation was addressed to Ms. Pauline Carter, Vice President, TechFlow Dynamics, emphasizing my professional title rather than family relationship. I debated whether to attend for several days before deciding that avoiding the event would be more awkward than participating. I was curious to see how my family would present me to their social circle, how they would explain my career trajectory to people who had probably heard stories about the family disappointment who chased computer fantasies. The anniversary party was exactly what I expected: elegant catering, carefully curated guest list, conversations that revolved around business relationships and social connections. I recognized many of the attendees from Chamber of Commerce events and industry functions, people who knew me as the TechFlow executive rather than the estranged family member. Most of the interactions were professionally pleasant but personally distant. People congratulated me on TechFlow's success, asked questions about technology trends, and expressed interest in learning more about business software applications. Nobody mentioned family dynamics or asked about personal relationships. The exception was Jessica, who approached me near the end of the evening as I was preparing to leave. "I wanted to apologize," she said without her usual elaborate politeness, "for the things I said years ago about your career choices. I was wrong about digital marketing, wrong about technology's importance, wrong about your potential for success." The apology was more direct than anything I had expected from her. "Thank you," I said. "I appreciate you saying that. I hope we can move forward with a better understanding," she added. "I'd like that," I replied, and meant it. As I drove home from the party, I reflected on how much had changed since that devastating dinner at Bones. I had built exactly the kind of professional success my family valued, but I had done it in ways they had never imagined possible. The technology industry that they had dismissed as a fad had become central to every business conversation I heard at the party. More importantly, I had proven to myself that success wasn't just about achieving financial stability or professional recognition. It was about building something meaningful, something that created value for other people, something that contributed to positive change in industries and communities. TechFlow's platform wasn't just software. It was a tool that helped business owners reclaim their time, improve their operations, and focus on what they loved about their work rather than drowning in administrative tasks. The success stories I heard from clients like Maria Santos reminded me constantly that technology's real value wasn't in its sophistication, but in its ability to solve human problems. That perspective would prove crucial as TechFlow entered its next phase of growth, one that would test everything I had learned about building businesses, managing relationships, and navigating the complex intersection of personal values and professional obligations. The call came on a Tuesday morning in March, 6 years after I had walked out of that restaurant with $5,000 and a determination to prove them all wrong. Jennifer Walsh's voice carried an excitement I had rarely heard from her, the kind of controlled enthusiasm that meant something significant was about to happen. "Pauline, I need you in Charlotte by tomorrow afternoon. We're finalizing the acquisition of Richardson Associates." I nearly dropped my coffee cup. "What acquisition?" TechFlow is acquiring traditional marketing agencies throughout the Southeast to create integrated service offerings. Richardson Associates was identified as a prime target because of their established client relationships and their successful partnership with our regional operations. The irony was so perfect it felt scripted. TechFlow was acquiring my family's advertising agency, the company that had rejected my digital marketing vision, dismissed my career prospects, and essentially paid me to leave town rather than contaminate their traditional business model with my technological fantasies. "When did this decision get made?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "The board approved it last week. The due diligence process has been ongoing for 2 months, but we wanted to keep it confidential until the legal frameworks were finalized. You'll be leading the integration process since you have the most experience working with traditional agencies. I would be leading the integration. I would be responsible for combining Richardson Associates into TechFlow's operations, for evaluating their personnel, for determining which aspects of their business model aligned with our strategic objectives. The family business that had cast me out would now report directly to me. Is there a conflict of interest I should be aware of?" Jennifer asked. "I know you have some kind of family connection to the agency." "My father founded the company and my brother works there," I said. "But we've maintained strictly professional relationships through our partnership agreements. I don't anticipate any issues." "Good. The acquisition should be straightforward, since we already have operational experience working together. Your job will be to ensure a smooth transition while maximizing the value of their traditional client relationships." After hanging up, I sat in my office for several minutes, processing the magnitude of what was about to happen. I wasn't just achieving professional success anymore. I was about to become my family's boss, responsible for decisions that would affect their livelihoods, their careers, their professional futures. The acquisition meeting was scheduled for Thursday afternoon in Richardson Associates' downtown conference room. I arrived early, wanting to review the financial documents and transition plans before facing my family in their new reality. The irony of the location wasn't lost on me. This was the same conference room where my father had rejected my digital marketing proposals, where Marcus had dismissed my vision as computer games, where I had been told my ideas had no place in serious business conversations. My father entered the conference room at exactly 2 o'clock, accompanied by Marcus and their corporate attorney. He looked older than I remembered, with gray hair that had been carefully styled to minimize his age but couldn't quite conceal the toll of recent business pressures. Marcus appeared tense, his usual confidence replaced by the careful demeanor of someone navigating unfamiliar territory. "Pauline," my father said with formal politeness, "I understand you'll be overseeing the integration process." "That's correct," I replied, opening my portfolio and spreading the transition documents across the table. TechFlow is committed to preserving the client relationships and institutional knowledge that make Richardson Associates valuable, while integrating your operations with our technological capabilities. The meeting proceeded with professional efficiency. I outlined TechFlow's plans for the agency, explained how their traditional advertising expertise would complement our technology platform, and detailed the timeline for operational integration. My father and Marcus asked practical questions about staffing, client retention, and reporting structures, treating me as the corporate executive I had become rather than the family member they had rejected. But beneath the professional veneer, I could sense their discomfort with the power dynamics. 6 years earlier, they had sat in this same room and delivered an ultimatum about my career choices. Now I was sitting in the same room, delivering information about their career futures. "What happens to existing personnel?" Marcus asked. "Everyone will be evaluated based on their skills, experience, and fit with TechFlow's operational model," I replied. "We're not planning massive layoffs, but we will be looking for opportunities to optimize efficiency and eliminate redundancies." "And management structure?" I consulted my notes, though I had memorized these details hours earlier. Richardson Associates will operate as a subsidiary division within TechFlow's Southeast region. The current management team will report to regional leadership, which means reporting to me. The words hung in the air like a declaration of victory, though I tried to deliver them as neutrally as possible. Marcus would be reporting to me, my father's company would be operating under my oversight. The family business that had rejected my vision would now be implementing strategies I developed. "I see," my father said quietly. "Any other questions about the transition process?" I asked. "When does the integration begin?" Marcus asked. "Immediately. TechFlow officially takes ownership next Monday. I'll be working closely with your team to ensure minimal disruption to client relationships while we implement new operational procedures." After the meeting, my father lingered as Marcus and the attorney gathered their materials and headed toward the door. "Pauline," he said when we were alone, "I want you to know that I understand the unusual nature of this situation." "It's a business transaction," I replied. "Personal relationships don't influence corporate decision-making." "Of course not." He paused, studying my face. "But I hope you'll remember that the people affected by these decisions are the same people who taught you everything you knew about business fundamentals." The comment stung, because it contained enough truth to be manipulative. They had taught me about business relationships, about understanding customer needs, about the importance of trust and credibility in professional interactions. But they had also taught me about the dangers of refusing to adapt, about the consequences of dismissing innovation, about what happens when pride prevents learning. "I'll remember everything you taught me," I said, "both the positive lessons and the cautionary ones." The integration process began the following Monday, with a staff meeting that felt like a performance of corporate theater. I stood at the front of Richardson Associates' main conference room, addressing employees who had watched me grow up, people who remembered when I was the idealistic college student who talked too much about computers and websites. TechFlow's acquisition of Richardson Associates represents an opportunity to combine traditional advertising excellence with cutting-edge technological capabilities, I explained to the assembled staff. Our goal is to create a comprehensive service offering that helps clients succeed in both traditional and digital markets. The questions were practical and pointed. Staff members wanted to know about job security, about changes to their daily responsibilities, about TechFlow's expectations for performance and productivity. I answered each question directly, emphasizing that competence and adaptability would determine individual success during the transition. But I could see the skepticism in their faces, the uncertainty about whether this young woman who had once been dismissed as a dreamer could successfully manage a complex corporate integration. Some of them probably remembered the stories about my family exile, my rejection from the agency, my pursuit of digital marketing fantasies that nobody took seriously. The skepticism began to dissolve over the following weeks as TechFlow's integration strategy produced immediate results. Our technology platform streamlined Richardson Associates' project management, eliminated administrative inefficiencies, and provided real-time analytics that helped account managers better serve their clients. More importantly, the combination of traditional relationship management with digital marketing capabilities attracted new clients who needed comprehensive services. Marcus adapted to the new structure with professional grace, though I could sense his ongoing discomfort with reporting to his younger sister. Our weekly update meetings were models of corporate efficiency, detailed progress reports, specific performance metrics, clear action items for the following week. We never discussed personal matters or acknowledged our family relationship during business hours. The transformation was most visible in their client relationships. Richardson and Associates had been slowly losing accounts to agencies that could provide integrated digital services. Under TechFlow's ownership, they not only retained existing clients but began attracting new business from companies that needed both traditional advertising expertise and modern technological capabilities. Within 6 months, the acquired agency was generating 30% more revenue than their pre-acquisition baseline. Client satisfaction scores improved across every measured category. Employee productivity increased, while job satisfaction surveys showed higher engagement levels than they had experienced in years. The success attracted attention throughout the advertising industry. Trade publications wrote articles about TechFlow's innovative acquisition strategy and the successful integration of traditional and digital marketing services. Conference organizers invited me to speak about corporate mergers and the future of advertising agency operations. But the recognition that mattered most came during a routine client meeting in July. Marcus was presenting the results of an integrated campaign we had developed for one of their oldest clients, a regional bank that had been with Richardson Associates for over 15 years. The campaign combined traditional media placement with sophisticated digital targeting, social media engagement, and real-time performance optimization. "This is exactly what we've been looking for," the bank's marketing director said after reviewing our results. "Traditional agencies understand our market, but they can't provide the digital capabilities we need to reach younger customers. Digital agencies understand technology, but they don't understand our industry or our customer relationships. You've given us the best of both worlds." After the client left, Marcus turned to me with an expression I hadn't seen since we were children. "You were right," he said simply, "about all of it. Digital marketing, technology integration, the future of the industry. You saw it coming years before anyone else did." "Thank you," I replied. "I should have listened to you back then. We all should have." "Maybe," I said. "But if you had listened, I might never have learned to build something from scratch. I might never have developed the expertise that made this acquisition valuable." It was as close to reconciliation as we had ever come, an acknowledgement of past mistakes without dwelling on their consequences, a recognition of current success without diminishing its difficulty. The conversation was interrupted by my assistant, who knocked on the conference room door with obvious urgency. "Pauline, I'm sorry to interrupt, but Jennifer Walsh needs to speak with you immediately. She says it's about the board meeting." I excused myself and called Jennifer from my office, wondering what crisis required immediate attention during what had been a routine client presentation. "Pauline, I have extraordinary news," Jennifer said without preamble. "The board has approved a major promotion. You're being named Senior Vice President of Strategic Acquisitions for the entire Southeast and Mid-Atlantic regions. You'll be responsible for identifying and integrating additional advertising agencies throughout the territory." The promotion represented the kind of corporate advancement I had dreamed about during those long nights in my studio apartment. Senior Vice President meant equity participation, decision-making authority, and influence over TechFlow's strategic direction. It meant I would be building exactly the kind of integrated marketing ecosystem I had envisioned years earlier, when everyone thought digital technology was a passing fad. "There's one more thing," Jennifer continued. "The board wants you to relocate to our new regional headquarters in Charlotte. You'll be managing operations across 8 states from there." Charlotte, the city where I had first worked with TechFlow, where I had learned to bridge the gap between technology innovation and traditional business practices. The city that represented everything I had built since leaving Atlanta, with nothing but $5,000 and a determination to prove them wrong. "When would the transition happen?" I asked. "As soon as possible. We want to announce your promotion and the expansion plans at the Southeast Technology Conference next month." After hanging up, I sat in my office and looked out at the Atlanta skyline, thinking about journeys and destinations, about the difference between revenge and success, about the complex relationships between personal vindication and professional achievement. I had achieved everything I had dreamed about and more. I was successful, respected, financially secure, professionally influential. I had proven that digital marketing wasn't a fantasy, that technology could transform traditional business relationships, that innovation and tradition could coexist and strengthen each other. More importantly, I had learned that true success wasn't about proving other people wrong. It was about building something meaningful, something that created value for clients and employees and communities. The acquisition of Richardson Associates wasn't satisfying because it gave me power over people who had rejected me. It was satisfying because it created opportunities for everyone involved to succeed in ways they hadn't imagined possible. The phone rang again, interrupting my reflections. My father's name appeared on the caller ID. "Pauline," he said when I answered, "I heard about your promotion." "Congratulations." "Thank you. I also heard you'll be moving to Charlotte." "That's right. Before you leave Atlanta," he said carefully, "your mother and I would like to take you to dinner. To celebrate your success and to have some conversations we probably should have had years ago." I considered the invitation, weighing the potential for meaningful dialogue against the risk of reopening old wounds that had finally begun to heal. "I'd like that," I said finally, "but let's make it somewhere new, somewhere that doesn't have history attached to it." "Of course," he agreed. "Somewhere new sounds perfect." The restaurant my parents chose was a small farm-to-table place in Virginia Highland, the kind of establishment that prioritized authentic conversation over impressive appearances. My mother arrived first, wearing a simple dress instead of her usual formal attire, looking more relaxed than I had seen her in years. My father joined us 10 minutes later, apologizing for traffic with genuine warmth rather than his typical executive efficiency. "You look wonderful," my mother said as I settled into my chair. "Success suits you." "Thank you." I studied their faces, searching for the judgment and disappointment that had defined our interactions for so many years. Instead, I found something that looked like genuine pride mixed with regret. My father cleared his throat, assuming the posture he used for important announcements. "Before we order, there's something your mother and I need to say. We owe you an apology that's about 6 years overdue." "Dad, you don't have to." "Yes, I do." His voice carried the firmness I remembered from childhood, but directed toward himself rather than me. "We were wrong about your career path, wrong about digital marketing's potential, wrong about the future of our industry. But more than that, we were wrong about how we treated you as our daughter." My mother reached across the table, her fingers brushing mine. "We let our fear of change override our faith in your judgment. We chose conventional expectations over supporting your dreams. That was unforgivable." The words I had waited years to hear landed with surprising gentleness. I felt acknowledgement rather than vindication, closure rather than triumph. "I understand why you made those choices," I said carefully. "You were protecting what you had built, defending values that had served you well. I was asking you to risk everything on ideas that seemed impossible." "But they weren't impossible," my father replied. "They were inevitable. You saw the future while we were clinging to the past. The courage that took, the vision, the persistence, despite our rejection, that's remarkable." We ordered dinner and spent the next 2 hours having the kind of conversation I had imagined during those lonely nights in my studio apartment. They asked detailed questions about my career journey, my strategies for building client relationships, my vision for TechFlow's continued expansion. For the first time in our relationship, they listened to my professional insights with genuine respect rather than polite tolerance. "What you've accomplished with the Richardson acquisition is extraordinary," my father said over dessert. "You've created exactly the kind of integrated service model that agencies need to survive. We're all learning from your leadership." "Marcus told us about the results you've achieved," my mother added. "The revenue growth, the client satisfaction improvements, the employee engagement scores. You've transformed the company into something we never could have built ourselves." The praise was gratifying, but what moved me more was their curiosity about my future plans, their genuine interest in my perspective on industry trends, their obvious pride in my achievements. They weren't just acknowledging my success, they were celebrating it. "There's something else we want to discuss," my father said as we prepared to leave. "The $5,000 we gave you that night at Bones." I tensed, wondering if they wanted repayment, or if this was leading towards some kind of financial negotiation. "We want you to know that was never meant as an investment or a loan," he continued. "It was us paying you to go away, to take your embarrassing ideas somewhere they wouldn't reflect poorly on our reputation." "I know," I said. "But watching what you've built, understanding the value you've created, seeing the respect you've earned throughout the industry, we realized that $5,000 was the best money we ever spent. Not because it got rid of you, but because it freed you to become who you were meant to be." My mother smiled through tears. "You used our rejection as motivation to build something we never could have imagined. That's not just professional success, Pauline. That's strength of character." The conversation ended with genuine embraces, the first physical affection we had shared since I was a teenager. As I drove home to my apartment for one of the last times before moving to Charlotte, I reflected on the strange circular nature of forgiveness and success. 6 years earlier, they had called me a dreamer, whose ideas had no place in serious business. Tonight, they had acknowledged that my dreams had become reality, while their certainties had proven illusory. The vindication was complete, but it felt less like winning, and more like everyone finally understanding the same truth. 2 weeks later, I stood on the stage at the Southeast Technology Conference in Charlotte, accepting recognition as Regional Executive of the Year, while announcing TechFlow's expansion plans throughout the Mid-Atlantic. In the audience, I spotted Marcus and my father, who had driven up from Atlanta to attend the ceremony. The speech I gave focused on the future of integrated marketing services, the importance of bridging traditional and digital approaches, and the opportunities that emerged when established businesses embraced technological innovation. I talked about building bridges rather than burning them, about the value of combining institutional knowledge with adaptive thinking. But privately, I thought about journeys and destinations, about the difference between proving people wrong and proving yourself right. The family that had once called me a failure was now part of the organization I led. The industry that had dismissed my vision was now shaped by the strategies I had developed. The dreams they had called fantasies had become the foundation for their continued success. Marcus approached me after the ceremony, his expression carrying something I had rarely seen from him: genuine admiration without reservation. "I've been thinking about what you said at dinner," he began, "about how their rejection freed you to become who you were meant to be. Do you really believe that?" I considered his question seriously. I think I needed to prove to myself that my vision was valid, regardless of whether they approved. If they had supported me from the beginning, I might never have developed the independence and confidence required to build something truly innovative. "So in a weird way, we helped you succeed by trying to stop you?" "Maybe, or maybe I would have succeeded anyway, just differently." I paused, watching conference attendees network around us. The important thing isn't what happened back then, it's what we build from here. 3 months into my Charlotte position, TechFlow completed acquisitions of 6 additional advertising agencies throughout the Southeast. Each integration followed the model we had developed with Richardson Associates, preserving traditional relationship strengths while implementing technological capabilities that enhanced service delivery and operational efficiency. The success attracted attention from technology investors, business schools, and industry analysts who wanted to understand how we had created such effective synergy between seemingly incompatible business models. I spoke at conferences, contributed to trade publications, and consulted with other companies attempting similar integrations. But the recognition that meant the most came in a quiet moment during a routine client meeting. Maria Santos, the restaurant owner who had been one of my first success stories at TechFlow, was expanding her operation into South Carolina and needed comprehensive marketing support that combined local market knowledge with sophisticated digital strategies. "You know what I appreciate most about working with your company?" she said after we had finalized the expansion plan. "You understand that technology should serve people, not the other way around. You've built something that makes our lives better, while respecting what we value about traditional business relationships." That evening, I walked through Charlotte's downtown district, thinking about the journey from that devastating dinner at Bones to this moment of professional fulfillment and personal peace. I had achieved financial success, professional recognition, and family reconciliation, but more importantly, I had learned that true accomplishment comes from creating value for others, rather than seeking validation for yourself. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Saw your interview in Forbes about technology integration strategies. Brilliant insights. Your grandmother Isabella would be proud. She always said the future belonged to people brave enough to question the present." I stared at the message, realizing it was from my father. Isabella, the great-grandmother I had never known, whose entrepreneurial spirit had apparently influenced my own journey in ways I was only beginning to understand. I typed back, "Thank you for telling me about her. I'd love to hear more stories." His response came quickly. "Sunday dinner? Your mother is making her famous peach cobbler." I smiled, thinking about circles and new beginnings, about how sometimes the best way forward is to remember where you came from while refusing to be limited by where you've been. "I'll be there," I replied. The family that had once called me a failure was now part of the future I was building, not because I had defeated them, but because we had all learned to see success differently. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't proving others wrong. It's creating space for everyone to be right. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.